Welcome to the 12th Z Jaipur Literature Festival's Charbagh. We will begin our first session of the day shortly. The Jaipur Literature Festival is proud to present Z Entertainment as the title partner, Nexa, who has come on board for the first time as the festival's associate partner, our venue partners, Rajen Kilachan and Bank of Baroda, JCB Prize for Literature Bookstore, managed by Full Circle, our cause partner, Dettol, Banega Swachh India, Black and White, our celebrations partner. Thank you to John Mislaski, Aga Khan Foundation, Getty Foundation, J. Paul Getty Trust, British Council, Nordic Lights, Mahindra World City, Airtel, Kingfisher, Grover, CK Birla Hospitals, Avid Learning for believing in the festival and their continuing support. New partners this year, Population Foundation of India, Child Labour Free Jaipur Initiative, DMI Finance, Dell, Sun Village, Air India, Ola, O2 Sparkle and Swami. Our publishers, Penguin, MIT Press, Westland, Oxford Dictionaries, Murthy Classical Library of India of Harvard University Press, and HarperCollins. We would like to thank our media partners, Red FM and Rajasthan's very own Patrika Group and Bhaskar Group for their generous support year after year. Our new partners, Business Standard, Outlook, and DNA. Our social media partners, Facebook and Twitter, increasing our reach to the world. Vyus, Wattpad, and Launchora, our podcast partner. Ladies and gentlemen, we are delighted to introduce the first session of today, session number 154, After Trainspotting, Irvine Welsh in conversation with Chandrahas Choudhury. One of the most successful contemporary Scottish novelists, playwright, and short story writer, Welsh's work is characterized by a raw Scots dialect, its fabulous humor, and brutal description of Edinburgh life in all its chunky seediness. In conversation with author Chandrahas Choudhury, he talks about his life and recent works. May I request you to give a big round of applause for these two today. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming out on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. It's not really my usual time. It's not really my audience's usual time either. We're usually just getting to bed at this time, basically. So, thank you.
When we only have one life unless you have some information to the contrary. And we only have 1 hour, so let's get straight to the big stuff of literature, music, football, drugs, and God. What do you care for the most?
It used to be drugs, and now the older I get, it's more like God, you know?
Really? And where is literature in there? I bring that up because unusually for a writer, I think it wasn't clear from your biography that in the first 30 years of your life, books were a big part of your world, or were they?
Yeah, I kind of, I think when you grow up in a small apartment, basically a small flat, you don't really have the room for a lot of books, basically. You know, so you kind of there are books that get passed around, but they're not really. You don't really kind of curate them. You don't have a kind of library in a sense that you can go back to. So it was. I didn't really. You know, I've always experienced books as kind of hand-me-downs. My uncle Jack did an Open University course. He was a fireman. And I inherited a lot of his books when I was kind of like an early teenager. So I got into Evelyn Waugh and the Brontes and all that kind of stuff through him.
I was interested when you said about Trainspotting, which when it became such a big hit that many of the people who bought it and read it were people who otherwise had never bought or read books, which kind of puts you in the same league as the Bible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of like to see myself as a kind of sort of a pseudo-biblical figure, basically. But yeah, I mean, it was quite an interesting thing because a lot of people were, you know, it was supposed to be the most shoplifted book ever in Britain, and kind of probably mostly by myself at that time, to be honest. But it was quite nice to see a lot of people that had kind of, you know, had never had much experience with reading being introduced to it. One of the, I remember a friend of mine who got sent to prison was saying that it got passed around the prison very quickly. Everybody was into it in this jail. But another thing, I remember in Glasgow, I was doing a talk and a reading in Glasgow, and this guy came up to me, and he had just been out of prison, and he said to me, I read the book, it was fantastic, really enjoyed it, it kind of spoke to me, I'm just out of jail. He was quite destitute. And I remember, like, 2 years later, I saw him, and he came to another reading, he was doing a course at Glasgow University. And he had done an access course, and then he had got onto a full English literature course. And he was like, oh, I really enjoy your books, they've changed my life, I've turned it around, you know, because I got into reading because of you. About 5 years later, I saw him, and he was a lecturer at a university in Australia in literature. And he's like, and now he's a professor of English literature at a university in Texas. And we went out to dinner a few years ago, and I said, and we're talking about literature and all that. And I said, did you read my latest book? And he goes, oh no, fuck off, I don't read your books anymore, I've moved on to proper literature since then.
Well, you had him and then you lost him. He just used you as a ladder, Irving, to another place.
I'm a gateway drug, basically.
It's interesting that you bring up prison because, in a way, when you open the pages of Trainspotting, first of all, there's, for those who have never read it, there's that shock of what you see right up there in terms of the language, the spelling, and the way the words move across the page. And then as you try and get to what the characters are about, they are also in a kind of prison, isn't there? A kind of existential prison. But is there some real state in history that you are trying to describe? Something about Scotland or Edinburgh in the 70s and 80s?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about the world, really, because, I mean, I see that book as about a kind of novel of deindustrialization. Because I remember in Britain when, you know, in the Thatcher era, when everything was shutting down, all the factories and mines and docks and railways and kind of all the old industrial kind of areas of Britain were being laid to waste. There was a kind of, a very kind of patronizing sort of sneering sort of approach to the way that people that were left behind were kind of treated, that they were somehow dinosaurs, they couldn't adapt, they couldn't retrain. But the world and the environment was changing all around them. And now this is a problem that everybody faces, particularly the middle classes in Britain, that a lot of these jobs now are being destroyed by technology. They're going to be increasingly destroyed by technology. I mean, jobs like law, paralegals, the Kiva robots are going to be doing all that data sifting. The Kiva robots can even do surgery, so a lot of paramedical jobs are going to go. So, and now we're all kind of, we're all facing this existential crisis that people from the industrial working classes faced before. You know, we're creating this economy and this society. The technology has moved on. So in some ways, you know, what is the purpose of human beings? You know, we are, to some extent, making ourselves redundant. We're making ourselves superfluous in this economic and information order. And there is an existential crisis that goes along with that. There is a kind of that asking these big questions. Why are we here? What is the purpose of us? And I think really that if you look at any kind of society in transition, If you look at when we transformed from feudalism into industrialism, when we started to leave in the UK, when people started to leave the fields and move into the factories, be crammed into towns and cities, there was a plague. There was a kind of public health. There's always an accompanying plague of transition. And the plague was one of like the Black Death, public health, kind of people being pushed together in insanitary conditions. And now, when you think about the transfer from capitalism to conceptualism to a world that we don't make physical goods, or we can make these at zero cost. And so now we're making ideas. We're just basically kind of manufacturing ideas and concepts, which are very difficult to monetize. The resulting plague is like kind of, drugs in some way are the plague. They're the kind of, they're filling the gap in a sense. They're used for pain management, but they're also used for some kind of consciousness expanding and some kind of way of getting in touch with who we might be, or trying to explore who we might be in different ways. So I think that's the kind of thing that I'm writing about. I'm writing about a world that's in transition, and it seems quite a grandiose thing to say, when when some people say, "Oh no, you're just writing about junkies in Scotland," basically. But I think we're all writers now, to some extent, have to be writing about this transition that we're going through, because we don't really know how it's going to pan out or what's going to happen, and there's all these kind of dangers and threats about, and there's opportunities too, though, so as all the old ideologies start to crumble, there's a lot of opportunities for humanity as well. So I think we're all engaged in kind of writing about that to some extent or another.
But as sort of as society changes, so does the world of drugs. And what is different between how it used to be in the 70s and 80s and today?
Well, I think it's like everything else. It's tied into consumerism. We have more consumer choice in everything. From food. If you look at all the different stalls here, clothing. But we also have a kind of broader range of choice in drugs as well, and they serve all different purposes. It's like, prescription drugs are kind of such an immense industry now. Big pharma is such an immense industry, and the conflation with kind of prescription drugs and health now is such a big thing. It's like in a way it's where health is a massive scam for kind of late capitalism, just like kind of housing is, and just like education is. Really, it's a kind of bank kind of run sort of business. The idea is to keep you alive as long as possible, but to keep you sick as long as possible as well. So you might live to kind of 120, but 60 years of that, half that life, will be spent absolutely miserable and ill and taking all these pills and stuff just to get through the day, basically. But also, as you're buying all these pills, your assets are kind of being steadily taken away and removed to the banks and to big pharma, basically. Just very much the same as the education system and the housing system.
When we see characters in your books, sometimes it's clear that they do drugs because it's pleasurable and it puts them in some other place. But you've also said that if the government had made vitamin C illegal, we'd have injected that too. And which suggests to me there's another aspect to your writing about the scene, which is a kind of anarchist view of the state.
Yeah, I think that, if you look at what happened to people then, when I was very young, it was kind of, you kind of moaned about it because you were at the bottom of the pile, but it was relatively good to be working class in a lot of ways. You had a culture of music and football, but you also had things like full grants for education. You had university fees paid and by the state, and you had a comprehensive education system. You had full employment. You had kind of tax rebates, and you could go from one job to another job, and so it was always there was room for kind of maneuver and room for personal expansion and growth. All that was suddenly just taken away, and basically people became trapped in kind of in housing schemes, and which became ghettos very quickly, and there was no real avenue out. So why would people not be despairing about that transition? Why would they have any kind of investment in a government? Why would they have any belief in a government? And when the Labour Party, which was traditionally the party of the working class, under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, when they embraced that kind of neoliberal economic and social order with policies of privatisation and financialisation, and carried on the Thatcherite legacy, basically that then kind of became the ultimate sort of betrayal. And I think it set things up for the rise of the populist right that we now have in the form of Brexit in the UK.
I mean, there's a lot of very good quality description and diagnosis of drugs and despair in your books, but there's very rarely any solutions offered, and as and when we see them, they tend to be of very personal kinds, like Renton escaping to Amsterdam at the end of Trainspotting. So what do you say to people who say, why don't you, in a sense, I admire your resolve to stay completely in the world of your characters and not try and speak above them. Is that part of your method as a writer?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think that, I mean, nobody's really interested on kind of whether I'm kind of pro or anti-drugs, and it seems kind of really irrelevant and trite. I mean, it's like, I think you have to see, you write about the world as you see it, and to me, kind of drugs are a pretty kind of unremarkable part of everyday life and everyday social life, rather than something to kind of be celebrated or to be kind of feared or whatever. It's just the way it is, really. And what you have to do from, if you're writing about characters, is you show them going through negotiating all that kind of social sort of, all these kind of social obstacles, and you show the consequences of their behavior on themselves and on the people around them, good and bad. And I think that's your real responsibility as a writer, to do that, and not necessarily to moralize.
What happened to, when you published your first book and became such a big success, where did you find yourself within the British literary world?
I don't think I did, really. I mean, I don't think you really bother so much about that. I think that when you write a book, I mean, I soon discovered that when I finished the first book, I was right on to the second one, then on to the third, and I've always got a book on the go. So I kind of, or usually a book and a screenplay or stage play as well. So I'm kind of a working writer, and I'm not kind of a big one for kind of London literary parties and things like that. So you don't really have much if you're basically constantly on it and you're out doing your stuff. I mean, I do music, I do DJing and stuff as well. So if you're on that kind of vibe, you're not really engaged with kind of literary society as such. So you don't really have much of a conception of your place in it. I mean, I'm always nose to the grindstone, so I'm not really aware of kind of what's going on.
Dead Men's Trousers is your fourth or fifth sequel to Trainspotting.
I kind of think it's number 3 chronologically, but it's kind of number 4 in terms of the prequel thing. Yeah.
So I meant to ask, does it mean something different, and is it easier to lift up a world when you and your readers already know who the people are in it? It's easier to start a book and to take the story forward, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big problem is that because it's been translated. The characters have been translated into 2 movies, into loads of stage adaptations. You tend to see actors' faces when you write the book rather than the characters. So you have to do the horrible thing about rereading your old books again to get your sense of how the characters are. And most writers will tell you the very worst thing you can do is read one of your old books, because all you see are the flaws and the things that you would do different. And I think, you know, it's a horrible thing to have to do. It's like one of the most torturous things you can do is to reread your old books, but you have to get the description of the characters. Now I've gotten wise to it. I've got an old copy of Trainspotting and Porno where I have a little ticket where the descriptions are, so I don't have to go through and look for them.
Are you saying you never read your old work with pleasure, and if not even for the pleasure of the story, for remembering who you used to be? I find when I look back at something I'd written a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, I'm not saying that if I went back and started to re-edit these books, I would make a mess of them. I'd probably kill them now, you know, because I think you know, there's very much a vibe and energy of the time that you write something in that you can't really recapture, and you shouldn't kind of, and I come with my kind of daft, kind of late middle-aged man's critical eye on what was a kind of novel written by a kind of young guy or a youngish guy.
I wonder if other readers also notice that Dead Men's Trousers, the acronym for that is DMT, which also appears to be the latest fancy drug in the world of hallucinogens. Have you taken it, and what is it like?
Yeah, I have taken DMT.
By the way, is that a code of some kind? The title?
Right. Can I get a show of hands? Anybody else taken DMT here? Whoa! Actually, we've got a couple. We've got a couple. Well,
maybe we should invite her up for the next stage of questioning.
There's there's 2 people kind of been bold enough to admit they've taken DMT, and it is quite an incredible experience. I'm sure they'll agree with me that, especially if you do the Terence McKenna thing and you take the 3rd toke and you get it right into the system. And it's very different if any of you trendy people have been to ayahuasca ceremonies and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very different from that. It's like you're basically sitting on your couch. You have you shut your eyes, and it's nothing like acid or mushrooms or any of the other hallucinogenics, because with acid and mushrooms, you tend to kind of see a distortion of what's there. With DMT, you go into a completely different place. You're kind of you go into a place that's both inside and outside your head. You shut your eyes, and basically, these little gnomes come along and take you on a little tour, and you fly into space, or you fly down the side of a mountain. A lot of the images that you can see, like the Last Supper images from the Bible, you know, obviously come from kind of people taking DMT in pre-biblical times. And like everything to do with Christianity, they're stolen from other people and kind of sort of compiled in this book called the Bible. So so it's interesting, and there's all sorts of theories about it. Some people reckon it opens the pineal gland, which happens before you die. Basically, so you go into this antechamber between life or death, or between or between kind of life and birth, even. But it is a very intense experience. It only lasts for about a minute to 90 seconds, and then you're kind of out of it. Your eyes are a bit blurry for about 10 minutes afterwards. And then it's like it never happened. There's no come down. There's no psychological kind of thing. You just think, wow, that was fucking intense. And then you could go and run a marathon or do a full day's work or play the piano. There's no physical come down. So which makes me think that we've somehow done it before. And there's no fear as well, which is weird for an intense drug. There's no sweating or heartbeat raised. You're kind of still aware that you're on the couch while all this is going on. So a very intense drug. And the interesting thing about it is it's not a recreational drug. It's an experimental, a kind of knowledge-based sort of drug. So once you've done it a couple of times or once or twice, you don't really have any urge to do it again. You just think, well, that was a unique experience. I'll find out soon enough what it's like when I do pass over the other side of existence or whatever. But I would recommend to everybody to try it once, definitely.
Where could we get some?
I don't have any with me right now, but understand. I've got a friend in Edinburgh who has these big DMT parties, basically, which usually involves about half a dozen people sitting around watching one person on the couch with their eyes shut. So they're not the most riotous parties, like, you know, and then listening to them going like, "Whoa, that was crazy!" after it. So, but it comes from tree bark apparently, and it's pretty easily produced if you're in the know.
I've heard, Irvine, that lots of your fans now sort of take you as an extension of your characters, and when they meet you, they never come only with words of appreciation, but also with tokens of the love for you, which they slip to you in little pouches and envelopes.
You know, it's one of these things that, particularly when you're doing a tour where you have to get on planes, like I'm doing an American tour in March for Dead Men's Trousers, and I have to make sure that I kind of flush all these drugs down the toilet back in the hotel before I go through the airport. Otherwise, I'm going to end up in prison. Because people just come up in these lines and they'll put a wrap of cocaine into my pocket, take that later on, or, you know, or cannabis or something. And it's like, I just think, no. No, I don't want any fucking drugs. Like, you know, it's like, and I think this is a tremendous transformation because I've spent half my life trying to score drugs, and I've spent the other half trying to avoid drugs, basically. Like, you know, so it's heartbreaking. You know, I can see every morning and when I'm touring, I can see the younger me looking at me in horror as I flush these drugs away down the toilet. But I have to, because I've got to go onto the plane, you know, and so one of these days I'm going to forget, and I'm going to be caught, and I'm going to go to prison, and I'm going to make this, I'm going to tell this story to all the police and officials, and they're just going to laugh in my face and say, "Sorry, sir, you're going to be banged up for 10 years.
Have you ever wondered about what this disposal system is doing to the water supply of the cities that you pass through?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I wonder what all this disclosure is doing for my credibility. That's much more concerning.
Where does music figure in your life? Because when you were younger, you used to play in a punk rock band. I believe the name was The Pubic Lies. And now you've gotten back to music again with a little swing through literature.
I was terrible. I got kicked out of every band I was in. And I remember I was in a record shop in Camden in London, North London, in Inverness Street. And back in the old days, in the kind of early 80s, you used to have all this, you had all these little cards in the window, like drummer wanted, you know, a phone number kind of, you know, and I was looking around, you know, got my records, and I saw like this, I saw this sign, like this little card written out, bassist wanted. So I thought, I'll play bass, you know, I just taken an interest, and I looked at the card, and I recognized the phone number on the card. So I went round to the phone box, and I phoned up the phone number, and it was my friend who was the guitarist and singer in the band who answered, like, you know, and he went, and I put on a London accent and went, "Hey, all right, mate, I seen the little advert, and I thought to myself, well, bassist, I'll have a go at that." And my pal goes like, yeah, my mate plays, he plays bass, and now he's fucking rubbish, like, you know, he's a lovely geezer, but fucking rubbish, try to get rid of him. I went, "You fucking bastard." "Oh, sorry, mate, I was going to tell you, So this happened a lot. You know, you kind of think, I'm always the guy who gets kind of kicked out the band when the band progresses and begin to develop musically, like, you know. So, I realized I was never going to make it kind of big in that way. But the good thing about it was that I wrote songs, and the songs kind of were basically ballads. You know, they were stories. You know, every song I wrote was telling a story. So I thought, well, just dispense with the music, and you can get on with writing stories. So the stories kind of grew out the songs, basically. And the stories became bigger stories, which are just novels. But interestingly then, Acid House happened. House music split the music and the lyrics up, because the original house music, there was no lyrics in it at all. It was just all dance music, basically. And I realized that you can get, I could kind of roughly kind of mix records on a beat. So I started to DJ around about the same time as I started writing, which I had to stop because DJ hour, when the writing took off, DJ hours and writers hours are very, very different. You're just getting in from the club with your records as a DJ when you actually want to get up as a writer and start writing. So, but I've got back into it now. So I've got back into making electronic music and DJing again.
What is the most transcendent experience you've ever had in your life outside of that is not linked to drugs?
I think it would be music. I think you get. I think you have great experiences with books because, but you can't really connect in the same way. You see people maybe reading a copy of your books on the London Underground or on a plane, and you kind of look at them, you think, I wonder what they're thinking or if they're enjoying it. With a movie, it's better. If you go to a premiere of one of your films, you sense the audience kind of vibing. But if you're DJing in a club and the crowd suddenly go nuts when you put down a tune or you put down a certain kind of beat, you get that instant feedback. I remember I was DJing in Manumission in Ibiza to 10,000 people, and it was it was just, everybody was going nuts, and it was just like, wow, this is absolutely incredible. But the next DJ came on, and everybody went nuts. It was incredible. But because they're all drunk and smashed, they're on holiday, they're going to go nuts anyway. So that brings you back down to earth. But it's still a great thing to kind of to be part of.
It seems like you're speaking of these experiences of communion, but there is something very beautiful about the single, faceless communion of literature too, isn't it? Between a voice from the past who might even be dead today, and taking that off the page and putting it into your own brain. And is there some book for you that you read over and over again?
I think the book that I keep coming back to is Ulysses by Joyce, because the first time I read it, I was in my early 20s, and I didn't understand a word of it. Honestly, it was completely impenetrable to me. And I thought maybe about 10 years later, I thought, I'm going to go back to this book, because it's kind of a challenge. I'm going to see if I can get more out of it this time. And I still didn't really understand it, but I kind of enjoyed it more because I thought, stop trying to see this as just a simple, straightforward narrative story that you have to work out. Just kind of enjoy the language, trip on the language, trip on Dublin kind of being a character, the city being a character in this book as he's going around it. So then again, maybe about 7 years later, I went back to it again, and I got more out of it again. And probably every kind of few years, I've picked up Ulysses and reread it and got more out of it and kind of really enjoyed it more because I've seen it from a different angle. And I think that's what a really great book can do. It keeps coming back to you in a different guise. You keep seeing it in a different way and get more out of it every time.
I mean, if you offered a different kind of life to whatever you've had, do you think you would accept being a professional footballer?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have been a professional footballer. I mean, for the money alone. I've got a couple of friends that are professional footballers, and the problem of it is that you're kind of landlocked. You have to live in the community that you play in. So that's why they isolate themselves with agents and walled and gated houses and all that, because they get a lot of stick when they go out. I go out with a friend who's he's retired now, but he was a top professional footballer for a long time. And when we go out, everybody says "Oh, Irvine, great to see you. Love the books and all that." And they turn to him and go, "Yeah, fucking bastard," if they support the other team. But if they support this team, it's, "Oh, brilliant, great to see you too." But, I kind of crossed the divide, but he gets a lot of stick from the opposition fans.
What about your own team? How are they doing the Scottish League?
Oh, we just, our manager just kind of has been suspended for insulting the chairman or the chairwoman of the board, and the assistant managers walked out. Our captain has punched our centre forward, so he's been suspended. And it was all looking chaos. And we played a game last night, and surprisingly, we won 3-1 after being a goal down. So it's never a dull moment at Hibs, like.
Are you sure they're not all just reading you in the hours that they get off?
I think they're just acting out. I think they're acting out a scene from Trainspotting, basically. I think they do that in the dressing room to motivate themselves, like, you know.
What is your most precious material possession?
I don't know really. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm not very materialistic, you know. I'm more into experiential decadence. So I like to kind of, I like to travel well and kind of eat well and not particularly dress well, as you can see, but. Yeah, I kind of like to live in the moment and enjoy things in the moment rather than sort of have a lot of material stuff. I bought a new apartment in Miami about 18 months ago, and I've never kind of loved a house as much as I love this one because I've got a balcony at the front for the sunset and one at the back for the one at the front for the sunrise and one at the back for the sunset, and it's just a nice cool pad basically, you know. So. I like this place, and I've got my flat in Edinburgh. I've got this friend. She's been staying in my flat at Edinburgh because she got a job at Edinburgh. She left London, and she's very posh, very kind of posh woman. She said to me, and when I went back to my flat at Edinburgh, I said, "Oh, you've had it redecorated and you've got new furniture." And she went, "No, I've just actually cleaned the place." And she goes, "I had to vacuum the walls." So I went, "Oh, but it looks great now." And I've always thought this flat was a bit of a slum, but now it looks like a 90s boutique hotel just because she's cleaned it.
What was it like working with Danny Boyle?
Well,
can you tell us something about that experience that you've never told anybody before?
Well, yeah, I mean, he's become a good friend down the years. I think the thing was that when he first wanted to do Trainspotting, he sent me, I was living in Amsterdam, and he sent me Shallow Grave that he had just done. It hadn't come out, you know. So he sent me a tape of Shallow Grave, and he said that he wrote me this very kind of emotional letter, and he said, "I really want to do this book as a movie. It's got to be my next movie. You've got to sell us this. There's me, there's John Hodge, the screenwriter, there's Andrew MacDonald, the producer, and we're a very tight unit, and we all love this book. We want to do it. This is my film Shallow Grave, which is coming out in the summer." So I'm watching Shallow Grave and I'm thinking, this is very good. I like the energy of it, and it would be great if we had, instead of these horrible Edinburgh yuppies, it would be great if we had my kind of working class characters, but in a kind of thing like this, I could see how it would fit. Then this guy gets in touch with me, and he says to me, I want to buy the rights to Trainspotting, and he says, "I've got a great idea. I know who would be a great director. Top of my list would be Danny Boyle." So I thought, oh, this must be Danny Boyle's producer, because I knew nothing about the industry then. And I kind of said, and the guy was offering loads of money. He offered me a big kind of ton of cash, much more than Danny was offering. So I said, oh, they must have upped the rate a little bit here. So I thought, right, fabulous. So I signed the rights away to this guy. And Danny kind of came on the phone to me and said, I thought you were going to sign the rights over to us. You betrayed me. but I said, oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was your guy. basically. So I thought that was his producer rather than just a producer who wanted to work with him. So fortunately, it was a happy ending to the story. I managed to kind of get them in touch, and they got together, and they were able to sort it out. So I still got the big money, and he got the film. So everybody, it was happy ever after for everybody, like, you know. Yeah, terrific guy to work with. And I remember I said to him, I was directing a film myself. I directed a TV movie for Channel 4. And I was very nervous about it because I'd only directed like kind of pop videos and short movies, short films. And I was quite nervous about the idea of working with actors for an extended period, like a 10-week shoot. And I said to him, have you got any advice, Danny? How should I kind of work with actors? And he goes, just tell them everything they want to hear. Just lie to them to get them to do that scene. And then once they've done the scene, they'll forget about all the moans that they had in the first place because they're nervous because everything they do is going to be like immortalized forever. It's not like on stage when they can get on stage the next again day and they can, if they have a bad performance, they can do a good one the next again day. They're really nervous about it. So they'll hit you with all sorts of stuff about money and expenses and kind of stuff that's nothing to do with you. But you just have to listen to them and say that, you know, and tell them they're doing brilliantly all the time, you know. So that was good advice, basically. Kind of lie to actors.
Great. We've done 45 minutes, so I think we have to leave some time for questions, and let's have some. What about you, Aman? In the first row, and then we can go a little bit backwards. Does someone have a...
Sorry, can you hear me? Yes, really enjoyed the session. What I wanted to ask you was, Edinburgh has this really weird image of being posh with people with stiff upper lips, especially from people from the West Coast. How do you consolidate that image with what you have portrayed in the book? Because even the landscape of the city is really interesting, where it exists on two levels, the upper levels and lower, and something that inspired, for example, R.L. Stevenson as well in Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, where he has two faces of the city. So how do you consolidate that?
Yeah, I think that's, again, I think as you said, it's been a very inspirational city for writers to write about during the years because of that duality. Originally in Edinburgh, in the old town, you had the labouring people were on the bottom of the tenement. The tradesmen, were kind of the joiners and carpenters and bricklayers and plasterers were in the middle. And the lawyers and teachers and doctors were on the top. And then they built the new town and they moved the lawyers, teachers and doctors into the new town. So you basically had the class split between working and middle classes. And now it's like you have the centre of the city is all kind of quite kind of smart and posh. And you have surrounded by all these schemes, you know. And it's basically kind of... in some ways, it became the urban planning model for the rest of the world, in a sense. The separation of the kind of the professional classes from the working classes. So it is an interesting city to write about in that way, and it does have. I think it's also been a way. It's been a model for kind of for rebranding the global city, because all cities now are the same. You know, they have a city centre which is designed usually for tourists and students and incomers, and the places where the real people that work or don't work and kind of live around, you know. So they all have their cultural kind of conceits and vestiges and stuff like that, but they're all pretty much the same. They all operate on that kind of sort of model, really. I think you have to go beyond the city's kind of self-propagated view, which is basically a kind of, you know, is propaganda, basically. It's to get people into the city, to get tourists and money and businesses into the city. And to get beyond that and actually look at how people are actually living the kind of day-to-day life in the city. And I think, you know, the kind of work that impresses me, usually in fiction, is when you can make the city into a character in the book, and to do that, I think you have to get beyond the the kind of tourist board view of the city and get into the reality of it.
Yeah, just a question on your writing process. Are you a fan of plotting, or is it like spontaneous, creative highs?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to at some point, but I tend to let the subconscious do the heavy lifting, and I usually, what I do is I have a standing desk that you know, I wind up, and it's the same. It gets to the same height as the desk that I have my decks on, my Pioneers and my mixer and my keyboards, and I'll sit there on them and get a Reason kind of software up and put a drum beat down and just start banging on the keys and kind of, and then I get a little vibe going. Then I just go to the computer and just start banging out text, and I just move kind of back and forward until I've got a lot of music, and I've got a load of text. I've got like kind of, when I get to 20,000 words, print it all out, take it away, and then sit down and think, what the fuck is this mess, basically? And see if I can find any leading characters that are asserting themselves, any themes that are asserting themselves, even perhaps a kind of narrative kind of through line that's kind of, you know, a story that's emerging. And then try to kind of roughly kind of think of it in terms of 3 acts, you know, and then the next draft is a bit more. I wind the desk back down to kind of to sort of to desk height, and I start to you know, suddenly it's like for me making a racket in the room and you know, shouting and screaming and reading bits out and dancing around and, you know, doing more stuff. It's got to be total silence. Nobody's allowed to talk and all that. That's why I tend to get through wives and girlfriends. They tend not to stick around, basically. They get a bit fed up with this kind of, these shenanigans eventually. And they think, they go, we've got people coming over. Why don't you come down and talk to people, talk to real people instead of talking to your imaginary friends in your room? And you kind of, you go down there and you're like, I want my pals upstairs. I don't want to talk to you real people. So you get immersed in it, basically. And that's how, that tends to be kind of what my process is, you know. I've got a lot better. I've got a lot better since I've been I've got to know actors, and some of them they've got very good advice on how you actually de-roll, how you actually come out of character, basically. I remember when we were shooting Filth with James McAvoy. He's an absolutely terrific actor, and James would be playing this very kind of horrible, kind of racist, misogynistic, kind of Nazi, filthy cop, basically. And he would be completely in character and so intense. And then at the end of the shooting, he would go upstairs to his room, and I would think, we're never going to see him again tonight. About half an hour later, he'd be down in the hotel bar with a big smile on his face, like, you know, he'd be back to being James McAvoy again. And I was fascinated because that book almost killed me to write, you know, and he was living this character very intensely. And I said to him, like, how the fuck do you do that? How do you kind of get back into being normal again? So he showed me all these, like, kind of, you know, sort of, taught me all about all these kind of techniques that actors do about de-rolling, about how you see us, you know, what are three ways you're like this character, what are 3 ways you're different, what are, you know, and all the, you know, and another couple of actor friends like Tam Dean Byrne and all that, he's told me about all the breathing and kind of meditation things you can do to get out of role. So actors have been very helpful to me in terms of rejoining the human race after a writing session.
Either, yes.
You said you were in a punk band. Who were your total punk heroes when you're growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, originally, I suppose, Iggy Pop, who was actually before punk in some ways, kind of, and he's actually a friend and neighbor of mine in Miami now. Um, and kind of really good guy. And it's funny because I've got to know him quite well now over the years. And I was very nervous when I first met him, and I kind of, I thought, this is a guy that I have a poster of him on the wall, and I'm going to turn into this kind of 14-year-old version of myself. So I was quite sort of nervous when I met him. And now he's just a friend, and it's really strange. You know, I don't really, it's hard to associate him with this guy that, you know, I sort of kind of, you know, had on the wall, basically. But still got him on my wall in my house in Miami. I never let him into my house because I'd be embarrassed if he saw the big picture of himself in the raw power era. So I kind of, yeah, the last time I saw him, I was went for coffee with him in Coral Gables, and he had no shoes on, and it was raining. It was a tropical storm, and I said to him, like, you know, Jim, where's your shoes? He says, you know what, Irvine? I gave him away to this bum. His feet were in bad condition, so I gave him those shoes, and suddenly all this rain shit started to come down. I don't know how I'm going to get in my vehicle, man. And he goes, tell you what, there's a Foot Locker. It's 2 blocks down the street. You go and get me some shoes, man. I said, all right, I'll go down there and get you some shoes. And the rain had stopped, like, you know, so as soon as I got down the road, it started to piss down, tropical storm. And it wasn't 2 blocks, it was 5 blocks down the road, you know, another 5 back. So I've got him his shoes, and he's going, so yeah, yeah, I mean, I thought to myself, you bastard, I've got a fucking picture of you on my wall still, like, you know, which I've had for years. But it was an honor and a privilege to get him his sand shoes.
Yes, you, and then we'll come this side after that.
Hi. It's an honor having you address us. Trainspotting as a book and a movie was a huge part of my teenage years, which is a really fucked up thing to admit. What did you think of the sequel, the movie? Because I watched it a few months back as a 40-year-old man who lived a lot harder in another life, and it kind of hit me like a train. But I don't know if you like it or what you know, the extent to which you were involved with it.
Well, I mean, I have to like it because I was one of the producers and I was in it as well, you know. So that's the thing about Boyle's very sly in that way. He always gives you something to do and gets you involved, so you can't slag off the film if you didn't like it. But I did actually like it. I thought it was, I mean, I didn't, you know, I was one of the ones that we wanted to shoot it a lot quicker than we did. You know, we didn't want it to be this long. But I think it actually benefited because you saw them as older characters. I think if we had have shot it when we wanted to do it originally as porno, it would have just been these more wacky adventures of these still youngish guys. Because they were middle-aged, we could put that kind of not just nostalgia, but that sense of loss element in it, of people looking back at what they had and what they'd gone through. And it's one of these things that a lot of people find about their past. It's like, no matter, I mean, I kind of spent a lot of my past kind of, you know, sitting on mattresses, kind of zonked in my box, staring at walls and all that. But there's something about kind of being young that I would rather, you know, I mean, I live a much better life than that now, and I kind of, you know, I'm in some ways a much more rich, rewarding, and fulfilling life. But part of me misses being that guy that was on, you know, that was kind of getting into all these kind of stupid, self-destructive adventures, because there's that sense that you've got all ahead of you, basically, and there's that, you know, there's an opportunity for change and transformation. But there's certainly something great about that point in time, and there's certainly there's a very human story of loss of that. So I think, yeah, to me it was a very powerful, emotional film, and it kind of resonated a lot because of that passage in time.
Yeah, my question's a kind of a similar question but going back to Trainspotting, the first film. I can imagine as a young novelist getting your first story into a film you would have been quite interested to see the finished product. And my question is, what was your impression of the film? Were you happy with the way they represented your story to the international audience through film?
Yeah, when we had a screening of it, the first ever screening of it, Danny was very nervous, and we got a screening in the Soho Hotel to a very kind of select audience, basically. And I was kind of very sort of anxious about it too. So I decided to bring a few friends along. So I went down to the Fortress Studios in East London, where a lot of the bands of the time, all the Britpop bands like kind of Oasis, Blur, Primal Scream, Pulp used to hang out there because it was, you had the recording studios, but you also had a friend of mine, Steve Malloy, Fatty Malloy, had a bar and grill place there. So he used to have big kind of parties there. And I went and got a lot of people that were very much into the book and who were very cynical about the film, you know, the idea of it being made into a film. So I brought them along. And a lot of them had contributed to the soundtrack that we're putting together. And Danny had said, like, where are you, you know, he phoned me, he said, who are you bringing along? I said, well, you're not going to like this, but I'm bringing along an audience of quite critical people. So they all came in, and they were just like they were just waiting for this this to be terrible, basically, as I kind of was as well, you know. And you know, when the opening credits came, everybody was like, "That's not Begbie," you know, when they saw Bobby Carlyle, because he's you know, he wasn't as physically big and kind of as we'd envisioned Begbie to be in the book and all that. And they were all like kind of, and then you just saw their faces starting to. I was looking at Bobby Gillespie on one side from Primal Scream, and Drunas on the other side. So I'm looking at their profiles, and they're suddenly getting this little smile on their face, and they're suddenly chuckling and all that. And they're suddenly, you know, I thought, this is great. This film really works. This is brilliant, you know. So, and it was up at the end. Everybody got up. All those cynical kind of drunken and drugged Britpop stars and kind of record music industry people in London and kind of London cognoscenti sort of liggers and blaggers, they all got on their feet and started cheering, and I thought, fuck, this film's going to be massive, you know, so it was brilliant.
You there, yes. In the
Hi. So I watched the movie. I watched the movie first, and then the book. And what struck me was, usually, when a book is good, the movie is bad. It usually doesn't carry over. The only exception I've seen is The Godfather. So how did it work for Trainspotting? How did the movie become this good? How is it so real with the book?
I think that the thing is, it's I mean, adaptation. But I was talking about this yesterday, but it's a funny thing that you can't try to make a copy of a book. Basically, for cinema, all you can do is get the main elements of the book, the spirit of it, you know, the characters and the story, and try to nail that. Whereas, you know, in a film, but a book, you can be a lot more adventurous and a lot more detailed and all that. And it's like, if I was pitching that book now to a publisher, I would say the book's about deindustrialization and the traditional working class looking for a role in society. If I was pitching it as a movie, I would say it's about rent and trying to come off drugs. So you have to be very specific about the story that you're trying to tell in a movie. So it means that you got to respect the different disciplines, and I think that was why it was successful. It kind of it respected the book as source material, but it also respected cinema as an art form, and it didn't, you know, it tried to make a picture, basically. And I think a lot of adaptations forget to do that. You know, you have to make it work as a piece of cinema. Replicating, you know, you can't replicate the book. Trying to do justice, if you like, to the book. You can only do justice to a book when you make a great film. You can only make a great film if you respect and understand cinema.
Hello. First of all, thank you very much for writing Trainspotting. And my question to you is, when it was premiered at Cannes Film Festival, it was shown out of the competition. because of its plot. How did you feel at that time? And especially after that, this movie went on to become a cult classic, and it is one of the top 100 movies of, I guess, British, of the 20th century. So what was your reaction when it was shown out of the film festival?
The film festival was great because we just got to go down there and have a laugh and kind of, you know, get drunk and party with supermodels and porn stars and all that sort of stuff, which is kind of on the private boat in the Mediterranean, which is fabulous. But again, it's like that thing that the critical reaction, the general reaction to it, you know, it's just very nice that people embrace it and kind of like all these things, but it's out of your control, so you can't kind of invest too emotionally in it. You know, as I said before, like, I'm a working writer, so all my energies is, you know, are focused on the thing that's in front of me, on the book that I'm writing at the time. So I don't really take my eye off that as such. And you just dip into, you think, well, this has got done well, people like it, they want to talk about it, they're enjoying it, great. Move on, but you're moving on, you're totally immersed in what you're doing next.
Last, someone else at the back? Yes, you.
Morning. Did you have any input in casting Ewan McGregor as Renton?
No, well, I didn't know Ewan at the time, and what happened was that Danny wanted to cast Ewan, and Ewan was in Shallow Grave. And as I said, he sent me the copy of Shallow Grave. And I thought that I'd really liked Ewan because I've seen him in a couple of things. I've seen him in very briefly in a Dennis Potter thing on TV, and what else? I've seen him in something else that he'd been good at. He'd been good in as well, and I thought he looked at kind of. He could be made to look like a kind of Renton character, like a kind of skinny, twitchy, kind of edgy, kind of Scottish junkie, basically, like, you know. And he was fantastic in it, you know, and he really worked hard. He lost a lot of weight, and he looked very, and he was, it's like a lot of young actors are. He was completely fearless, you know. He really saw this as a massive opportunity, and he grabbed it with both hands. So it was fantastic casting, yeah. Originally, it's funny that Ewan Bremner, who was the first ever Renton, he played him on stage, basically. And then Ewan Bremner was cast as Spud. He made that character his own. So actors are pretty amazing, the way they can inhabit character. It's quite a fascinating thing to see.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Irvine, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for braving Monday morning, guys. You're crazy.
There's just one last thing that I have to, you know, usually when we become friends with somebody, invite them to dinner, but it doesn't seem like you're a food sort of person. And to say thank you for the pleasure of eating Trainspotting, I got you a little present instead. I was trying to find 5 grams, but it ended up only being 2 or 3, but I suggest if you just take it home, lock yourself up, and...
I'll have a great time with it. Don't you worry about that.
And here it is. I've been put in a Ziploc bag for maximum freshness. It's called Camellia sinensis, also known as Darjeeling tea.
Fabulous. Thank you. I'll snort.